A couple other tips to point out for people with their forms, especially contact forms. Keep it to the fields that you actually need to capture, right? I get it's great. We all want a highly qualified lead, but when you look at each field in a form as kind of a brick in a wall, you build that wall too high, you're really asking a lot of that customer to get over the top of it. So really consider what fields are needed to start this conversation and make sure I can follow up.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast that's here to help you become the best digital marketer you can be and to reach and engage more of your ideal customers online. We focus on what's working now while keeping one eye on what's coming down the line so you can continue to be an agent of change. My name is Rich Brooks. This is episode 552. Powered by the 10th Annual Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference coming this October 9th and 10th to Portland, Maine, and online. When I first moved to Maine, I had no connections here. So when I needed a plumber or an electrician or small engine repair or even firewood, I would open up the local paper, find a provider, and make a phone call. Now, just to kind of paint the picture here, this was back in 1999, and the internet wasn't what it is today, as you can imagine. So very often businesses, especially small businesses like that, weren't even online. So that's why you would turn to the local paper. Well, all those calls, all of those voicemails often went unanswered. I couldn't believe it. Like coming from Boston where, people would be fighting over your business, here it seemed that people just weren't all that interested. I'm glad to say that things have changed a lot, and I've got my choice of electricians and plumbers and even firewood. But apparently the problem is still real. The struggle is still real, and that's what today's episode is all about. I'm bringing back one of my favorite guests to talk about some independent research, some original research that he did about what happens after somebody fills out your contact form. And we're going to talk about ways that you can take advantage once somebody does fill out your contact form, because otherwise, all of that search engine optimization, all of that social media, all those blog posts, all of those optimizing your website for conversions means nothing if you're not following through on the sale. So we're going to take a look at that. But before we get to that, I want to talk about this past week, because I just got back from Cleveland from the MACON conference, the Marketing AI conference that's held there every year. Now, you may remember that last year I went there with my agency mastermind. This is a group of me and 3 other agency owners that get together every couple of weeks to talk about our business and support each other. And last year, as AI was really coming to the forefront, we decided we really needed to invest in ourselves, invest in our businesses, and we needed to understand more about AI, the challenges, the opportunities. So we went to the MACON conference out in Cleveland, and it was a great experience. And we decided we would go back again this year. It was fantastic. I just want to say it's a really well put together conference, and I learned a lot. But I will say that a lot of the content was more for enterprise level companies than my own. I definitely found some good content for small to medium sized businesses. But what I got out of the conference more than anything else, more than even the content, was the networking. First of all, it was just great reconnecting with people I hadn't seen, some of whom I hadn't seen since before COVID. I got to spend some time with my friend and old mentor, Mike Stelzner. Hey, Mike. Hope you're enjoying today's episode. Mike and I go way back, and he really helped me in my career and growing my business. And it was great to be able to sit down with him really so many times during the conference and continue to have our conversations and our banter. And he continued to give me some really great advice. I also got to connect with John Munsell, who I had never met in real life. He was a guest a couple weeks ago. He was at the show too. Reconnected with Jordash Johnson, who I hadn't seen since 2 years ago at Social Media Week Lima. I never had had a conversation with Andrew Davis. I had seen him speak on stage a number of times. I've seen him as part of Heroic Public Speaking. I didn't even know he knew who I was, but apparently he did. And I'll tell you, he's much bigger in real life. The guy's like 6 feet tall, maybe taller. I don't know. Somehow, maybe seeing him up on stage, I always thought he was smaller. I told him that. It was a little embarrassing. He thought it was funny though. So anyway, it was those networking opportunities and connecting with people in real time that actually led me to find the solution for the problem. I went to Macon with a very specific thing I wanted to accomplish, and I didn't actually get the answer from a specific session, but I did get it from the people who went there and talking to them and connecting with them. And I bring this up as a roundabout way of talking about the importance of actually going to conferences and not just getting a virtual pass or watching a webinar, which is, I know, completely self-serving, right? Because this is where I dive into the part about our 10th annual Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference taking place on October 9th and 10th in Portland, Maine. 15 amazing digital marketing experts. These are the people that I learn from or have on my show and bring to you. And they're going to be all there in person, sharing their best content, being very available if you want to talk to them. We've got a VIP pass that allows you to go to a VIP networking lunch, among some other benefits, where all the speakers will be. It'll be a very intimate situation. You'll have a lot of time to talk to them. This is where things really happen at a lot of conferences. Yes, the content is great, but it's that networking, it's the human connection that makes all the difference. So if you've been thinking for an excuse to come to Portland, Maine, please consider doing it around the Agents of Change. Come check out the conference. I know you'll enjoy it. If you use the discount code AOCP, short for the Agents of Change podcast, you'll save an additional $25 off of the discounted prices that currently exist on the website. So go to theagentsofchange.com, check it out right now, and I really hope to see you in Portland, Maine. And I get it. A lot of you are from far away, not even in the US, and coming to Maine for a day or two, probably out of the question. And for you, we do have that digital pass. You can watch every single session on demand and a lot of the sessions during the live feed, and you can still use that same discount code. I hope you can take advantage of that. But if you're anywhere near New England, you really owe it to yourself to come out in person, meet me, meet the other speakers, meet the other marketing professionals that are also agents of change. And now, with that out of the way, let's look at this week's episode and learn more about what to do once somebody's filled out your contact form.
My guest today is back for his second go-round on the Agents of Change podcast. He is the co-founder and CEO of Leadferno, a conversion platform for businesses to close more leads faster with text messaging. He is an entrepreneur, founding and leading multiple software companies and digital marketing agencies for over 25 years. Today, we're going to be looking at how you can generate more business by what happens after people fill out your contact forms with Aaron Weiche. Aaron, welcome back to the podcast.
Rich, thanks for allowing me to be a repeat offender. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Now, we're talking today because you've done some interesting research into website forms. Talk to us about that.
So those who know me, no secret, I always have strong opinions, but what's even better than when you can actually back it up with some real data and numbers? And so I always love being able to do this kind of research. So at Leadferno, since we're all about conversions, we were introducing a feature having to do with being a contact form and lead capture on websites. And it led me to say, let's get some numbers behind my inkling and thoughts that there's kind of holes in some of the things that happen with contact forms. And there's also some really bad behaviors that small businesses are guilty of once that lead comes across their desk, and how they reply to it, how fast they reply to it, if they reply to it, all of those things that go along with lead management. So that was kind of the initial spark that created us to do this research and to look into this.
And so what were some of the findings that came out of this research?
Yeah, this is one of those interesting ones, Rich, where you can easily say when I start to share some of these numbers and we talk about things, I think the overall, where just about anybody who has come across this, read the research, saw the stats, they're like, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, right? It's contained on both ends, just based on factors of if you're a small business owner, if you're a digital marketer, how you know and understand these things. But maybe first, I do want to set up just so people have a good understanding about what went into this research, so they know.
Please.
My survey is a little wider than I just asked 3 of my friends what happens with their small business websites. But so we researched 225 small business websites across 3 different verticals: home services, medical, and then professional services. We grabbed these 225 from top 10 local pack ranking results. So they're either in that map 3 pack, or when you click into the local map finder, they're in the top 10 there. So these are established businesses that are doing some amount of digital marketing and are highly relevant in their service and the location areas that they're servicing. We made sure they had at least 25 reviews so we could get some proof of their customer base. But on average, the ones we submitted to averaged about 130 reviews. So very mature in that. What we submitted to them was very lead focused, right? These were not just, oh, hey, are you open today? Or what's going on? Or my friend told me about your business. We were getting very specific, like reaching out to a landscaper and saying, we want to put on a 10 by 18 foot paver patio in our backyard with a fire pit. Can we get together for an estimate? So very high signal to being a qualified lead for them. We gave them all of their information. We always submitted during morning hours and early in the week. So we weren't pulling, hey, Friday at 5 o'clock, we're going to submit this and see what happens. We actually wanted to give the business the best opportunity possible to shine with how they responded and their actions that they took. And then lastly, we tracked what went on. How did they reply and engage us after we submitted this lead via email, phone calls, and text messages over the next month after it was submitted? So with that, let's just kind of like cascade through a couple of things. One that I was at least encouraged because I thought it might be a little bit worse, but 4.8% of the contact forms we went to were broken. And I think this is one where if we didn't have our criteria, if we would have gone into people under 25 reviews, lower ranking, things like that, we would have saw some of these paying less attention to their digital landscape and more broken forms where you see their WordPress shortcode displayed on the page. The submit button doesn't work right. One way or another, the user just can't even fill it out. And we're not talking now about it's submitted and then it doesn't work, because we know that that happens as well. But we did have a handful that right out the gate, I went to the contact page and we couldn't even fill out a form, see a form, whatever that might be. The next thing that you might find interesting, that to me, I would include this if there ends up being like 3 takeaways from you and I talking today. This would be the first takeaway because it's so simplistic and so easy to do and so underutilized. Only 15.6% of the forms we filled out sent an auto reply email back. And to me, for something that's included in most form solutions, just takes a couple of minutes to set up. If you're not instantly replying and saying, good news, we got your form submission. Here's when you can expect a reply back or what you can expect as a next step. Here's how you can reach out additionally if we're not getting back to you fast enough or you prefer a different way to connect with us. To see that almost 85% of these forms aren't doing this simple step that is giving them just such a leg up over everyone else that isn't doing this, that was really mind-blowing to me.
So just to pause here for a second, because obviously online forms are a big part of our business, and I'd like to think I'm hyper responsive when I'm on the receiving end of them. But like you said, only 15% sent out an auto reply, which is a set it and forget it kind of thing on most of these forms. And in my mind, this is also a chance for you to brand yourself and set up your branding, set up the tone, the voice of your company, and to start building a relationship with somebody. And it only has to happen once on your end, and then it automatically happens until the end of time itself. So for anybody who's listening, the barrier to being better than your competition is not very high, right?
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
We're talking about like you can step over the limbo stick and not have to go under it at this point. Okay. So please continue on.
Yeah, I just thought, like I said, that one's mind-blowing. And just as you pointed out, Rich, 2 minutes to set it up and then it works for you forever. And it is a really valuable touch point that should not be ignored. After that, probably one of the biggest things that we were looking to have come out of this is understanding what does that speed of response look like, right? In our world, we often call it speed to lead. How fast is the business getting back to this prospect? And what we saw across all of our responses was that average time fell below just 18 hours. So 17 hours and 45 minutes and 49 minutes, is what the average response time was for that first human reply to when we submitted that lead. Now, when you compare this to other studies that have been done that show that the likeliness of converting a lead drops 80% after 5 minutes, and you're going hundreds of times outside of this with that response time of almost 18 hours, I wasn't surprised by this time at all. I've seen other studies and research show something in a similar slot to this, but it's still really eye-opening that to call someone back, send an email, text them back, and whatever else will still take that business on average up to 18 hours is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And again, I can understand that you might be in a meeting, and I guess this depends on the kind of business you are. I might be in a meeting. I might be an all-day meeting. It might take me, but the idea that there's a lead sitting out there, and I know that there's a very good chance that this person filled out my contact form and my competitor's contact forms. Like, there's no way I don't want to be first to respond to this person. And I have other thoughts on, being too responsive, but this to me seems like, again, it's a very easy step that we can take to just improve some of our response times, even if it's more, not a canned message isn't automatic, but I have like a script that I use when I do get in a form that feels like it could lead to something where I ask some follow-up questions, but at least I'm establishing that line of communication with the person completing my form. So again, barrier to outperforming your competition is still pretty low at this point, I think.
Yeah. And when you put this and you compound it with the lack of an auto reply for the vast majority of these, they're going 18 hours wondering, did they even get my form? Is anyone handling this? And yes, that's going to lead to, I'm either going with who contacted me first, if I did fill out 2 or 3 of these, or after a certain amount of time, which can differ for each consumer, you start feeling like they didn't get this. They're not getting back to me. I'm going to reach out to someone else, or they're too busy. So now they are pre-qualifying themselves and saying no to you and moving on to the next. And by the time you might get back to them, they're like, I already got it solved. Thank you. And that lead is out the door.
I know there's no worse feeling than not knowing if your email actually reached the person you were trying to intend. And I talk to my team about this. I always say it's like you're stuck in traffic and you're behind an 18-wheeler and you have no idea in this non-moving traffic. Are you just one light cycle away from moving forward? Or is there like a stuck bus up ahead that you're going to be there for 12 hours? You can deal with either one, but you need to know. So this is what I always tell my team. You follow up, and you follow up quickly. You let them know, even if your message is, hey, this is great. We'd love to talk to you. I don't have any time until tomorrow or next week. Here's a link to my calendar. Let's get something on the books, whatever it is. But let them know that a human being saw your email, saw your contact form came in, and it's being acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Filling out a contact form shouldn't be your lottery ticket and you're hoping to find out your
dice. Right.
Will my number be called today? And along those lines, I mean, here's the other eye-popping stat out of this. This one did floor me. 42.6% never replied. Not one. Not a reply to almost half. And when you think, Rich, right, like you're in the business of digital marketing and generating leads and whatever else, you understand that small business owners, marketers, what are they constantly saying? I don't have enough leads. Well, when we see that almost half of them get a lead, a very high signal, high intent lead, and they're not even following up with it once because they either lack process or enough touch points or follow through, whatever that might be, like that one was mind blowing to me.
Absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely aggravating. And I'll be honest, like from me, because I always respond to the emails, or I'm always handling emails that come in. I may not respond to 40% of the leads because I put leads in air quotes, because most of them they're obviously come-ons. Somebody wants to sell me something. That's not what we're talking about here. Yeah. We're talking about somebody who is literally like, I have one hand on the mouse and one hand on my wallet. Please get back to me. And almost half of those are not being responded to. Like that to me is crazy. So some of them might get lost in a spam folder. We can talk about that as well, but it just sounds like there's no urgency from the business to actually act on these sort of things.
Yeah. And I thought I'd include as kind of a sub-layer to this. This one we broke down by those 3 industries too. And interesting enough, even though they always get a bad rap, home services, contractors, everything else, they were actually the best. Only 39% of those failed to give a reply. Medical at 40%, professional services was the worst. So accountants, lawyers, real estate, 50.9%. So that one did tip
Wow.
over. Half of them did not respond to our lead being submitted. All right. When we break down that speed to lead time, that 18 hours, just to kind of give some more structure to what went into that, is that we saw only 10% of the lead responses were within the first hour. So now you have a very small. So if you start to break down, I gave you the stat about how much better conversion is when you contact in the first 5 minutes. Now, if we even say, all right, let's be reasonable. You're doing a lot of things. You wear a lot of hats as an owner, a salesperson, your role within the company, but being able to get to it, shifting gears within the hour, only 10% of businesses were able to do that. And that kind of golden area of 5 minutes, we saw just 3% of forms submitted were responded to within that. Another 4% in that 5 minute to 30-minute range, 3% in that half hour to hour. So even if we expand it further, 75% of the responses fell outside the first 4 hours, right? So if we think of that as in half a day for someone to get back to you, 3/4 of them couldn't even respond within half the day to get back to that consumer and prospect. All right. The next thing to take a look at too is how many times are people following up? And this one was of a lot of interest to me, just to be able to see like how much effort do people put in when they get this lead. They have a name, a number, an email address, and very specifics on what this person is looking for. And we all get, it can be hard to get in touch with prospects, especially if we're turning around and giving them a phone call right away. Just think with all of us, we look at our phone, we see the number. If we don't know the number, we're immediately thinking, do I need to take this right now because here's where mine's at or what I'm doing, whatever else. So within this, we saw that 65.5% only made one attempt to follow up with that lead. So I look at this from, those of you that might be college basketball fans and know what they call a one and done. You go to school for 1 year and then you're declaring for the NBA draft right away. 65% of these were one and done. They were only going to make one attempt at a very solid, well-qualified. You have all the information and buying intent signaled to it. We saw another 13% make 2 attempts, just 8% make 3 attempts, 4% at 4 attempts, and then 8% at 5 or more attempts. And obviously this can get a little crazy, right? I had 2 of them that made 16 and 18 follow-up attempts each over the next month, which at some point I definitely felt oh, holy cow, you are probably going way too far. But it also showed they have a process. Some of it was automated and they realized hey, we might turn someone after 5, after 10, and they're willing to continue to put in the work. And I have a lot more respect for those than the ones who made 1 attempt and that's all they can muster up.
Maybe I could get those names after this call is over, Aaron. I'm looking for a sales guy person. So yeah, we can just talk about that offline.
Yeah.
Anyway, those people probably are using some automated CRM software.
Yes.
I pride myself on over following up, just continuing and literally getting to the point where I'm emailing somebody saying, listen, I haven't got a letter from your lawyer saying cease and desist, so I assume it's okay to keep following up. I turn it into a joke. And yes, at a certain point, I realize the lead has gone cold. I'm just going to drop it. But better to try too many times than not try enough.
Yep, absolutely. And with that, we also tracked kind of what's the mix of channels that they're using to try to follow up with these leads, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, phone calls, emails, text messages. So when we looked at that, we found that 71% of all the lead responses just used one channel. So even if they made 2 or 3 or 4 attempts, they were doing them all by email or all by phone. Now, once we expanded that to 2 channels, so say they're going to call and text you since they have that phone number, or they're going to call and email, 24% were using 2 channels, and just 4.6% attempted all 3 channels. Now, I always throw out there, right? You need to make sure that when they're submitting that form, you have a disclaimer that you're going to try to contact them by whatever contact forms and numbers and email addresses they were giving you. So make sure you have that stuff buttoned up on kind of your disclosures before they hit send. But I was really surprised at just the lack of variance with some of them not to make an attempt at least at 2 different channels. I get for a lot of businesses, they really feel like phone calls are our best. And so we want to get them on the phone right away. But if you call them and you leave a voicemail, which a lot of times can feel like a faux pas to some people too, I'm never going to listen to my voicemail, but at least gives you a receipt that you made that attempt with them and to try to get them to call you back. turning around, not sending an email after that in another specific interval, timing, even the next day is really kind of crazy not to do that. And in this day and age where most people, we have shown in our previous studies that SMS is the most preferred channel over phone calls and 2-to-1 over email. If you're not sending a convenient text in that, even saying like, hey, we've tried you by phone and email, have it connected. Maybe a text is easier. Are you still interested in our services? To me, that's just a wasted opportunity. If you have permission to text them, you have their number, and you're not making that simple attempt.
I completely agree. And I'm just sitting here because obviously I've got my sales hat on while I'm listening to this. And I'm just like, I can feel the hairs in the back of my neck stand up because I'm getting so frustrated. Because for me, it's like, assuming it's a decent lead, I am going to email them a few times. And there's a certain point, usually it's after the second email, where I'm like, the number of times that people make a mistake filling out a form is high. So at that point, I will call them, I'll leave a message, and I'll say something like, hey, maybe the email, or maybe my email, they gave the right email address, but it went into their junk folder because they don't know my email address. And so that's how it ended up. So I agree with you, like having that second form of follow-up. And we don't use SMS, but after listening to you talk, I'm like, oh, I feel like this is a missed opportunity. I can see that this is the best way because we want to communicate with prospects and customers on the channels that they want us to communicate with. So like giving them multiple options just makes sense.
Yep. And that's what we found in this too. When we broke down, only 20% of follow-ups included a text message at any point with it. So again, when you talked about low barrier, low bar to be able to get over, only 20% are using texting at all in any of their responses at any time. And just 9.3% use texting as either their first response or as an auto reply to let that customer know that they received their information. So again, a lot of opportunity there with, again, arguably the most popular, easy to manage communication channel. But if you're not asking for permission to use it that right way as a follow-up and then engaging in it, you're wasting that most popular, easy to use channel by not reaching out to them with an SMS message to try to get that next step.
All right. So sidebar right now. And so I'm old school. I've got my phone, I've got email. I, of course, have a cell phone. Every human being does, but I separate my personal life from my professional life on the cell phone. Like I never use my cell phone for texting. You may have the solution, but for those of us who don't want to use our cell phone to reach out to a customer, what are the options from a company standpoint where we could text somebody? Like, what is the software or the solutions? I don't even know if this is something you do, but you know the industry. How can I use my computer to then send a text rather than to send an email or a voice call?
Yeah. Thanks, Rich, because you did just play right into exactly what we do. So we offer two-way SMS texting, and there are a number of solutions that do this, right? So I'm the same way. I have given out my personal cell phone very little in business life, but what this allows me to do is text with customers using the Leadferno app. So we have both a web app and we have native apps for your phone. So now your business conversations are all contained in there. And there's a number of other benefits where you can pass conversations to other people on your team. You can log them, you can track, report, all of those kinds of things that go along with it. So if you look into business texting and really you want to pair in on like two-way SMS texting, you're going to see a lot of solutions. I would love for you to look into Leadferno, but there are a lot of options that are out there. The area that we play in a little bit differently is we combine this with lead capture and generation. So the thing that our product does is we place floating call to action widgets on your website, letting them know, do you have a question? You can text us right now. We also encourage other conversions, like you can request a call. What was part of this research is we have an embeddable contact form that instead of being powered by email is powered by text messaging. So when they fill that out, they get an auto reply text message. And maybe that's using this as a segue when we talk about what you shouldn't do, or how to clean some of these things up. One of the big things, and again, take it with my bias based on my product and what I do, but email's just kind of shitty. It's crowded. You get hundreds of other messages every day of spam, whatever else. How does a lead stand out in your email inbox? If it comes in at the right time or the wrong time, that might have to do with if it's visible and if it's seen. And so we see a lot of that, and we saw responses to this survey where a business would reply 3 days later and be like, sorry, I just found this lead in my spam, right? Like something trips and now their contact form, which is their main digital lead provider, is going into their spam folder. We had a couple others were like, hey, we just found out our email that this is assigned to is broken. So there's definitely things with forms that can make them a little bit brittle, and email and some of its challenges and overuse and just the difficulty we all have organizing our email, that can make that really difficult. Now, when you take these leads and you're sending them into an app like ours, now you're getting instant push notifications that it's a lead. And when these are coming in, these aren't spam requests. They're not your vendors. They're not other things that are contacting you. It's really putting those on an island so that you can focus on them. You'd never turn on push notifications of your email because you would have 6 million push notifications every day and week that, again, now you're just blasting the same noise at a multiplier instead of being able to, oh, here's important new business on someone that has questions or wants to take a next step to work with me. So email is definitely one of those major culprits that you should be thinking about. If my super important, valuable leads are just going into email, is that the right tool for something that's so important and valuable to my business?
Right. And I spend all day tied to my desk. So for me, email does work. I know your personal opinion on it. And I've got things set up to make sure that I get back to everybody. But I can imagine that if you're in the trades and you are on the road literally the entire day, fixing pipes, whatever it may be, that getting those text messages or having an app that text, like that's going to be critically important so that when you finish that project that you're on right then, you can immediately get back to somebody and get that next job.
Yeah, totally. And when you consider advantages too of like a shared inbox. So if you're a small, you point out, yeah, you could be one person in a truck, but if you're a 3, 5, 10 person business in a shared inbox, everyone has access and sees that notification that that lead came in. So whoever out of the 3 or the 5 of you is available to first respond to them and make sure that they get a touch point and you're starting to help them, you can make that happen. And then based on what they need or clarify, yeah, they might be a better fit for someone else. Now you can assign that lead to them. And now that person knows, hey, here's who I need to work with. I see the conversation on what they other handle. It can be a lot more easy to manage and eloquent and forward and fast than trying to forward emails and things like that. We also get into things where I've worked with small business where like, yeah, we don't even know where our contact form goes anymore. I think it used to go to Sarah. She quit and we don't have access to her email. I mean, there's just so many things that can come up when people don't have control over those elements. A couple other tips to point out for people with their forms, especially contact forms: keep it to the fields that you actually need to capture, right? I get it's great. We all want a highly qualified lead, but when you look at each field in a form as kind of a brick in a wall, you build that wall too high, you're really asking a lot of that customer to get over the top of it. So really consider what fields are needed to start this conversation and make sure I can follow up. And if there's a lot of fields that are optional on here, I should be cutting those out and using that in my follow-up process to capture that information instead of it being a tell us everything or you can't work with us up front.
Absolutely.
The next thing is like when we were able to give stats in this on response times and things like that, when you're using just email to reply, you don't have that information. You're not able to track and be like, hey, Rich is really great. On average, he's replying to our new leads in 32 minutes, which is awesome. We'll keep trying to improve that, but we know that we're getting to them fast. When you use an application built for sales and sales responses, now you have tools to track things like first reply time, average reply time, time from open to close, which staff members / agents are the ones handling these. So now you can create competitive situations, you can benchmark things, and then you can improve upon them as well. So for people serious about this, when you take a look at apps that can help you track and report on those things, now you actually can put numbers to it, you can benchmark, you can improve what you're doing with it.
Awesome. Outside of integrating SMS, which I think is still fairly new for most businesses, I know that there's a lot of businesses that are already using it, but I think for the majority of businesses, at least that I see, adding SMS into their online forms is something new. Outside of that, what do you feel are some of the best ways that people or businesses can improve their responses when they do get these leads to make sure they're taking full advantage of them?
With anything, visibility, right? So even if you can't track or do whatever else, you should be talking about the response time on these leads. And even if you have to manually do it to some extent, you should be spot checking what that response time is. If you're the owner of a business or a marketing manager or whatever else, no one has any idea what time frame, or you guys don't have a commitment, or management isn't saying like, hey, if we get a new lead, however we can, we want to respond within the first hour. If those things aren't happening, they're not going to magically happen by themselves, right? So creating some amount of visibility, creating some golden rules around that, talking about it, and finding some ways to spot check or to look at how that happened. I would say that you definitely want to be able to do that, so that you're never going to improve something if you're not focusing on it. That brings a focus to it.
I'd also like to add in, and it kind of builds on something you said earlier. It's just like not getting the autoresponder, then all of a sudden it's a black hole. Did anybody actually even get my email? Is this form working? One of my personal frustrations is when I fill out a form and I stay on the same page and there's no clear indication that the form was actually processed. And then I'm like, should I fill it out again? I don't know. And so the more you can do to make it very clear, and what I usually recommend is that we send them to another page, which also makes tracking much easier on the Google Analytics side of things. But everything you should do is to make it very clear that that lead is important, that it is being seen, it is being processed. And I think this gets to your point of the autoresponder to their email, having somebody follow up in as a human with an email or with an SMS message or with a phone call after that, and then attempting multiple ways because they may have put in the wrong information, or they may have something set up that's not letting you get through to them. And it's just critically important that if you want this business, that you let them know that you're actively trying to reach them.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip, Rich, and one you see all the time, right? Some forms, below the form will be one little sentence in green, submission confirmed, right? And if you didn't scroll the right way, you won't even see that on the screen. So if there isn't something definitive, absolutely you should be forwarding them to a new URL and to a page that screams, we got you, we hear you, we're going to be following up with you. And to me, you just also really made me think of the point of this is, yeah, we have one aspect, the 42% that aren't responding at all. That is a major red flag, right? That's a huge problem. But after that, all these other things really is death by 1,000 cuts. So when you look at this, when your form's asking too many questions, when you're not giving them a clear signal that it's been submitted, when you're not sending an auto reply, when you're taking too long to reply to it, when you're not making enough temps or using the right channels, right? Most people listening right now can say like, okay, I'm offending 5 of the 8 Aaron just listed. And it's just a lot of small tweaks to really improve this, to have better process, better protocols around it, so that you can close more of these leads that you work so hard in time and money to get to come across your email inbox or your plate.
I couldn't agree more, because the thing that you need to fix first is those conversion points. Because what's the point of spending money on SEO or Google ads or social ads if you're just sending somebody to a form that doesn't work, or that doesn't feel right, or you don't follow up with them? You're just burning money. And so it makes sense to take this moment in time and just really take a look at every aspect. I would recommend that everybody go and fill out their own contact forms. If you've got a sales team, see how they respond. So maybe you use some fake information and use your home number so they actually follow up with you. But even so, make sure, is the message on your landing page or your thank you page saying what you want? Is it in your company voice? Like, this is, every step of this is an opportunity to start building a relationship and building your brand. And you're missing out if you're not doing all the things that you talked about today and all the other things that we discussed.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And when you think about this in terms of the shifting landscape of search results and visibility and things like that, conversion has never been more important. It is more expensive and harder to garner that attention and visibility. So if you work someone far enough down your funnel to a conversion point where they're willing to raise their hand and say, here I am, here's who I am, here's what I need, and here's how to get a hold of me, and you are not leveraging and maximizing that to its fullest ability, like, you're really going to be missing the boat on this. Because for most people, traffic growth and visibility growth is extremely expensive and very hard to come by. You need to be squeezing every ounce out of the bottom of the funnel that you can.
Absolutely. Preach. Aaron, this has been awesome. If people want to learn more about you, learn more about Leadferno, where can we send them?
Yeah, please go to leadferno.com. If you click to our blog, you will see this research and you can break it all down for yourself. I'm also very active on Twitter/X at Aaron Weike, and of course on LinkedIn as well. So would love to engage in any conversations or follow along as I continue to do research like this a few times a year.
Awesome. Aaron, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Rich.
I realized I said at the end of the intro what to do when somebody fills out your contact form. It almost feels more like what not to do when somebody filled out your contact form. But hopefully this gives you an incentive to make sure that you've got everything locked down, because very often when we don't get back to a client or a prospect, it's because we didn't even see it come in, or we're not getting these in a timely fashion. So first, make sure that you fixed everything in the process so that you can get these, and then make sure that you're getting back to people in a timely fashion. If you have any questions about this, Aaron would love to answer those questions. I'd love to answer those questions. Feel free to reach out to either one of us. His contact information and mine are in the show notes, so be sure to check that out now. If you missed anything, we took all the notes for you, as Mike Stelzner would say. Full transcript, a blog post, takeaways, Aaron's contact information, all of which is available for free at theagentsofchange.com/552. And while you're at the website, check out all the information about our upcoming conference, grab your discounted ticket, use that AOCP promo code to save an additional $25. And with that being said, I have one more favor to ask, and that's if you know somebody who's struggling with their marketing, they're not happy with their branding, or their website's not converting, or they need some help with their search, social, or mobile marketing, do me a favor, do them a favor, and introduce them to the show. Send them a link, tell them that you get a lot out of it, and maybe they will too. Because that's really how we grow the show, and we help other people become the best digital marketers they can be, and they can become an agent of change. Thank you.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.